curator, and I'm thrilled to mention that tonight's reading is the 100th reading we've had in the Soul Food Poetry Night series. 100 readings. Actually, there have been a couple of unofficial readings, so 100 plus. But this is the 100th official reading. And I think it's wonderful that we've been able to have this reading series here at Soul Food for so long. And I really appreciate the support of Soul Food Coffee House to make this possible. And thank you to all of you who were able to come as well. I'd like to begin by reading a poem by Galway Kinnell. And if you hadn't heard, he passed away a few days ago. This is one of my favorite poems by him, and it's more about words than blackberries. It's called Blackberry Eating. I love to go out in late September among the fat, overripe, icy, black blackberries, to eat blackberries for breakfast, the stalks very prickly, a penalty they earn for knowing the black art of blackberry making. And as I stand among them, lifting the stalks to my mouth, the ripest berries fall almost unbidden to my tongue, as words sometimes do, certain peculiar words like strengths or squinched or bromed, many-lettered one-syllable lumps, which I squeeze, squinch open, and splurge well in the silent, startled, icy, black language of blackberry eating in late September. Rest in peace, Galway Kinnell. Tonight we'll have two featured readers, and then we'll have a break. At that time, you can look at books that our readers have brought for sale, and then we'll have our open mic. Our question for the night, we have a monthly question for our open mic, and tonight's question is, what is your favorite Halloween activity? So I'm sure we'll get some creative answers there. The sign-up sheet is right down here, and we'll have it circulating at the break as well. So please do sign up if you'd like to read. Our two readers tonight are Michael Spence and Judith Skillman. Judith, you've read here before, at least once, and Michael, you've read in the open mic for sure. We're glad to have both of you back. So Michael, you're going to read first, right? Okay. Michael Spence drove public transit buses in the Seattle area for 30 years, a job he retired from on Valentine's Day this year. His poems have appeared recently or are forthcoming in the Hudson Review, the Sewanee Review, Shenandoah, the Southern Review, and Tampa Review. And I'm jealous. His fourth book, The Bus Driver's Threnody, which I think you can wave if you like, was just published this fall by Truman State University Press. And he was recently awarded a 2014 Literary Fellowship from Artist Trusts of Washington State. What I'd like to know is, do you write any of your poems? No, probably not while you're driving. But maybe you think of things that you want to write. Anyway, please welcome Michael Spence.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you for everyone for coming today on this rainy day. And it was fun to get invited for the Halloween reading because I happen to have a couple things that will actually fit that theme. But to answer Michael's question earlier, yes, I never actually wrote while I was trying to drive. I might have at a long stoplight tried to put down a line real quick. So, and at the end of the line, I had some time to write things, which I appreciated, that part of the job. The first poem I'd like to read is from Adam Chooses. My second book came out some time ago, and it's, let's see, there we go. It's called, first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Am I doing this all right? Okay, thanks. It's called The Flame Behind the Carved Eye. Just a small band of kids, disguised as ghosts and devils, we roamed the dark streets, carrying sacks like robbers' swag bags, knocking on neighbors' doors. The chocolate covered only nuts, the apples free of steel. Long ago, in the festival of Samhain, ancient Celts set their torches to bonfires. Night and its demons feared to approach those islands of light. A time when people knew evil strode outside their doors, and Satan rode his black serpent. Trembling, they huddled near the hearth, hearing the dead breathe their names. Guttering behind the carved eye, the flame rocks on its wick. Now, fathers and mothers, we venture in the dark with flashlights. Devils may lurk next door, wearing faces that look like ours. And for those real poetic nerds among you, that's an acrostic. Just so happens to spell jack-o'-lantern grin down the side. I was pleased with myself to do such a thing, I guess. As Michael mentioned, Galway Canal just passed recently, and I was thinking also that I'm going to make a reference to him later, but there's one of my first favorite writers I ever was enamored of was Edgar Allan Poe, and so his work figures in this poem. And the rest I'll read are from my book, except for one, The Bus Driver's Threnody. Excuse me. This is called It Started Out with Edgar Allan Poe. One afternoon, riding my bus home from keeping the books at the CPA's, I heard, "It's Halloween." Glancing up from the business section, the SEC was looking into more accounting scandals. Surprised the driver would announce such a thing, I saw how dark it was outside. Once upon a midnight dreary, his mic intoned. The words began to register like a tune I recognized but couldn't name. He got as far as the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain, then paused. That's all I remember. A man in the back started clapping. A girl and her boyfriend by the rear door joined in. When these three people climbed aboard next evening, they sat up front. "Let's hear another," I heard the girl say. I looked up from the paper. Congress was vowing to block the SEC. In time to see the three lean closer, as though to hear better. The driver wasn't on his mic, so I had to listen hard. He hummed, then did a short one. When he finished, the boyfriend nodded. "El Dorado, cool. You know this one?" He chanted, "Because I could not stop for death," and apparently reached the end, since the man said, "Good one. I used to know The Tiger by Blake." An older woman near him, with a simple "You mean," launched right in. When she was through, the two nodded, laughing. The girl pointed at the man. "You and me, we got to do each got to do one tomorrow." I peered through my reflection on the window into autumn. This time of year, you leave in the dark and come home in the dark. It seems the sun goes down as soon as it can. They'd sit together most days after that. They called themselves the Up Front Gang. A seat at a time, I moved closer. What more did these people know? Sometimes a face would leave, a new one join, like numbers moving between the debit and the credit columns, like lungs contract and swell. I wanted to be part of all that breathing. Among my college texts on risk assessment, I found An Introduction to Poetry. I thought I'd toss that one out. It had a line that made me smile. As I left the bus next day, I faced the gang and bowed. "I will arise and go now." They laughed. "Bravo," the man clapped, then said to the driver, "It's all your fault, you and that damn bird." The next one is based on an area I used to drive through, Magnolia. Some of you may know it, on my bus route. This one's called the Pumpkin Tower. Sorry. That day, I wheeled my bus through a left and instant right-hand turn. I saw with amazement this place, a domicile uprooted from Burien or White Center, the poorer end of this route. The roof dark as needles of hemlocks, walls slightly lighter than lichen, the small wooden house hunkered low as a mushroom. Among the columned edifici, which lent the neighborhood of Magnolia, though the flower doesn't ever grow here naturally, the cachet that only cliffs of cash confer. Its 4 conifers, growing close, ragged, thin as mizzenmasts, poked the sky like sticks in the eye of decorum, high above the zoning laws. Bound together by a lattice of ladders and platforms, the trees became a tower. From the top of the tallest fir, a black flag flew, a sort of Jolly Roger, its skull a pumpkin, crossbones a pair of cornstalks. The ensign for a ship of scarecrows? Did they hail from the desiccated country of October? No man of straw could hoist such a sovereign pennant, a disunion jack that snapped with contempt at all the lawns scalped as though taking cues from the felt of pool tables, the dopey topiaries. For this house sailed a green far from simple grass, a royal of vines tangled as snakes drowned the yard, leaves thrusting up like splashes made solid, splashes made by the pumpkins bobbing there, orange floats broken loose from a net gaudy and gigantic. Climbing the tower's legs like Laocoons, tendrils spiraled double helixes toward the dark flag as if trying to realize its depicted apotheosis. When a new dawn, its sun ribbed as a stout hull and stuffed with seeds, will sail. A lot of things get left behind on buses, of course, and so that prompted me to write the next poem, which is simply called Lost on the Bus. Umbrellas lie folded up like bats asleep. The drunk, crumpled as his sack of Mad Dog, is dumped on the back seat by the cops. Black knit caps are left behind. Some who worship the night have renounced their faith. Temple pressed against the glass, the woman rides all day and twists her transfer till she rings its time to nothing. Nickels and dimes are stuck like random offerings in the cracks of seats to buy safe passage. In his camo jacket, ears wired, the teenager fills a head so full of music he must wail. This next poem I like because it has what's often called adult language. And I've come up to this thought that since I am an adult, I like to think that everything I write has adult language. So that's my philosophy behind this poem. And it's called Consensus. To drive at night can be lonely. Behind the wheel is the darkest place on the bus. I feel cut off from the passengers, lit dimly in their seats. As I'm going past a stop, the bell rings. I keep driving. A big kid comes up. You missed my stop. Eyes on the road, I say he rang too late to stop safely. He growls, "Fuck you." The next stop is several blocks away. I'm wondering what to do when an old man in the aisle seat directly across from me pipes up. "He's right, pal. You pulled too late." The punk turns to face him. "The shit I did," he spits. The other says louder, "You waited too long to ring. Too slow means no go." "Fuck you," repeats the kid. The only riders besides this pair are sitting in the center of the bus, 3 longshoremen coming home from swing shift. The grimiest of them says, "Zip it, dickhead. You should have rung before." As the punk looks around, the old man laughs. "So fuck you." The kid's head swings back. "Fuck you," he replies. All the longshoremen, like a Greek chorus, yell, "Fuck you!" As though it's a stage direction, I pull the bus into the next stop. The doors hiss open. The kid looks my way. I know, I say, fuck me. Diving out the door, he flips off everyone. We all laugh like family. Thank you. Nice to know that obscenity can get a round of applause. Just to also mention a different holiday for this one that'll be here in a couple of months. This is called Home for the Holidays. At 4 p.m. the day before Christmas, there's no one on my bus. Dark as midnight. Everyone's bailed out. I slow to a stop at the foot of the hill to Lake Ridge. Snow beneath the street lamps glows slick as melted plastic. 2 cars abandoned in the ditch endure their gradual erasure, flakes stippling out their color. I look at the snow tapping the windshield and call control. Afraid I'll get stalled, I ask if this road's been closed. No, continue on regular route. I swallow. Can I get this big machine to the crest? I lean forward and press the gas. Halfway up, I begin to slip. Snow chains scrabble like a planer over the ripples in a warped board. The tires whine and skir, but the bus isn't moving. In a nearby yard, a girl staring makes me stop and set the brake. No bigger than the snowman beside her, she kicks its stomach. Like ghosts of winter, they gleam in the light from my windows. The engine hums when I climb out, as though it's wondering, what now? Beats me. I should have been driving a plow. Can you fix it? Yells the girl. I trudge over, clouds of breath bringing my fridge to mind, and the turkeys stuffed inside it. Hope so, I smile. But from her side of the street, all I see is a bus that's stuck as a lit-up block of ice. A snowball smacks my arm. When I turn, the girl laughs and flings another. Then her eyes widen. Your bus is leaving without you. I whip around. It's starting to slide slowly backward. It's gaining speed as I lurch run toward it. When I reach the middle of the road, all I can catch is the sight of the bastard receding like a flare dropped down a well. Missing the cars in the ditch, my runaway steers true as a toboggan in its chute. Oh, Lord, let it get all the way to the flat and just hit some snowbank. But then it hooks a left, loudly cracks aside a wooden fence, and the angle blocks my view. Hurtling down the slope, I snag a mailbox, whacking my leg against what's left of that fence. The bus has punched through the front of a house. It looks clenched in a ragged mouth. I knock on the door that's been knocked in and call out. No one's here. Squeezing through, I turn off the engine. The house inside is dark as the den of some beast, so I find the kitchen light, call control again. After a long quiet, I hear, "You'll have to wait a while. There's lots of buses tied up now." I figure I'll sit back in my seat, but a car pulls up in the driveway. Sighing, I lick my lips and go out to meet the owner. She whistles when she sees the wreckage, then grimly smiles. I didn't want to cook tonight anyway. I'm apologizing for everything, but she says, I need some hot chocolate. You want some? I feel myself nod, my face numb. Gathered in her kitchen, the three of us sit close as kin, this woman, me, and my bus. As a total jump out of sequence, this has nothing to do with bus driving, but it has something to do with you could say, the winter of our discontent economically, perhaps. This is sort of a modern prayer, you could say. It's called The CEO's Thank God. Oh Lord, our thanks for cancer being hard to trace, a question with no answer, sure enough to efface our profit margin. Spilling oil or radiation may now and then be killing the faceless in our nation, but it takes so long for symptoms of illness to appear, the thread-like cracks in a dam slowly spreading for years before the flood. Who can find our fingerprints are more than a smudge? You protect us. Your wisdom glints like light on rushing water that sweeps the riverbanks of the shacks that groan and totter. You let us keep our rank and lift us beyond the range of the tired and poor. You shine to dissolve their darkness. You changed our water to our wine. Okay. The next poem I'm going to read should have been in the copies of the Southern Review, which I've got down there, and I'm going to give those away to anybody who wants them. And for what I consider to be a rather petty technicality reason, it was not published in this issue, but it's in the book. And this poem is called The Night Driver Reads The Night Driver by John Cork. And you'll understand what it's about as time goes through. I've felt this fear. I'm driving my bus through miles of condensed dark when a man appears dead ahead, his scream my scream, as his body thuds aside to the stench of brakes scorching, my foot slamming as if through the floor. I feel I'm right there with the driver. At the same time, I know I'm just reading this graphic novel. When the driver stops, the body gets up and grabs the door handle. The almost victim doesn't seem hurt when he asks the driver to take him to the hospital. His eyes stare a deeper red than brake lights as he rasps, I haven't slept for 9 days. I've felt transported to another zone while driving a bus long into the sunless distances, bodiless from concentrating on the strip of black ahead. I'm sure I've carried riders like him, his skin the thinnest sheath stretched over a rage that strains for a target. I felt a strange tide rippling through my skin in the hours of deepest shadow that no one sees but the driver. When borders blur, rage and fear can cross like a virus. And behind the wheel, I've thought the words the driver keeps repeating, I'm only trying to get home. Bodies begin to appear along the road like signposts. A cop picks up the trail and catches the driver attacking his wife with the same tools left in the driver's car by the man he hit. The driver grins, eyes redder than the strobe on the cop's cruiser. The same car that soon pulls over a group of teens speeding through the night. The cop who climbs from the prowl car is the driver. He tells the teens, step out of the vehicle and no one will get hurt. Now when my bus hits something, an unseen part of the dark, I feel the fear I'm running over all the lives I might have lived instead of this. And I'd like to end with, excuse me, this last one. It's called The Night Driver Shifts to Days. He hates to wake up early, but he hates to work late even more. So the clock wrings the sleep out of him, the blackness clinging to his open eyes, dull as a film of slate his dreams won't transfer to. He used to drive the graveyard shift, and that's what it had seemed. In his bus, some eyes after sundown gleamed like those of the walking dead. Their stare gave him the feeling people weren't held as tight in their skins, the way he'd slow for a stoplight just enough to glance left and hang a right. It's easier to turn on red at night. He thought his skin had thickened over time, believing he'd grown used to the sort of sights the dark could bring. The drunks, occasional fights in the back, teenagers bragging about crimes he guessed they might actually have done. And driving at night meant fewer riders, lighter traffic, almost no supervisors to catch him making a mistake. Then that man waved the knife at him, jumped off, and ran. His friends tell him he hauls as many crazies by day. They're just hidden in the crowd. He replies, in the sun, they have to keep their faces on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sure there's way more bus stories still to come, and then even not just ones we haven't heard from the book, but other ones as well. Keep them coming. Next, we have Judith Skillman. She is the author of 14 collections of poetry and a how-to book called Broken Lines, The Art and Craft of Poetry. Her poems and collaborative translations have appeared in Poetry, Field, Seneca Review, the Iowa Review, Southern Review, Ezra, Pyrene's Fountain, and other journals and anthologies. She is a recipient of an Eric Matthew King Fund Award from the Academy of American Poets for Storm, published by Blue Begonia Press. She has taught at City University, Richard Hugo House, and elsewhere. Angels of Separation, her newest book. Do you have that to wave around? It's available from Glass Lyre Press and online. And you can also visit her website at judithskillman.com. So please welcome Judith.
Yeah, that's good. I'm a lot shorter than both Michaels. Thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here on the 100th Soul Food reading. Really thrilling. I don't have any Halloween poems per se, but I thought I'd read a mixture of seasonal and the most scary poems that I could find. So I'll start out with October. October. And the wild rose blooms again in stillness before rain. October, song of my sister, of the psalms said for gratitude against the coming of sickness and gray days. One long day lasts the whole of winter, one long night that never lightens. The wild rose strains to birth one more blossom, to tinge the edge of winter's sword with blood. We who live in houses, the lucky ones, we see and do not understand men who sleep beneath bridges, their heads cradled in cardboard boxes. We know the tide comes and goes as illness comes and goes. Our neighbors' bones will break and mend. Our children's children will fall and be well. October, and the wild rose raises itself up, at once plain and pretty, as if to right every wrong done to the kingdom of ants and bees, all those who live communally. I was getting pretty poor once upon a time, not so long ago, so I wrote this. The turnip. Once more you force its fisted mass, blanched white with a feather of pink. The bloodless promise? Has the chemistry of want exploded the dreamy cluck of that heart in your chest? Under the sky, the grave of dawns planted again, its beginning wed to the same milky stone. Infanticide. Promise I never did this. After you suffocate the baby, you go searching through cabinets for cereal, unnerved by its blue body, its fat cheeks white under the vice-like grip. After you suffocate the baby, you hear strangers talking outside. You wonder whether the wind has borne witness to this dream act, the most honest. There were avenues to travel, certain details open to interpretation. What puzzles you most? The guilelessness of the 8 or 9 month old, how it went along with the plot, putting its mouth in your hand, nuzzling your fingers like a mutt. On the night you suffocate the infant, you who never remember your dreams, the clarity of baby, hand, bassinet, refuses to leave its place beside the other known quantities. Water, the spit of land blown clean, save for black and white, sand that rushes into clothing with a vengeance, like carpenter ants burrowing into a stump for the sake of the colony, or the hole in your cheek, that double. I was trying out, I took a course at Hugo House from Carolyn Wright. She's an excellent teacher on the narrative, writing the narrative poem. And I'm not normally a narrative writer, and I very much admire Michael. very green, Michael's poems. Narration. So I had a lot of trouble writing these, but I'm going to read just a couple narratives, and then I'll switch to my book. This is called Address to My Phantom Limb. And no, I didn't do infanticide, and I don't have a phantom limb. But this comes from having chronic pain. And there's an epigraph. The fact that the representation of the face lies adjacent to the representation of the hand and arm in the cortical homunculus is crucial to explaining the origin of phantom limbs. So actually, when someone has an amputation, they have still all of the stuff going on right here. And the picture showed this hand curling. So I decided to give it 3 fingers. Address to my phantom limb. Curl if you must, little hand with only 3 fingers, the one that lies like a hat upon my head near the cortex. Sensation proves I miss you most when it rains, as in everlasting dampness nerve pain peaks. At least I didn't lose an eye, though an eye could never gesture the way you do, or distort itself into a giant thumb set like a conch shell close to the bit of fist you make. Close, if you will, limb I never knew. It epitomized grief to a widow, or the sadness of a Friday growing older inside a room, any weekday, and also any Saturday or Sunday, with rites reserved for others, the fasting, the confession, for all ritual depends upon the hand to take in or push away. Punch the face you lie next to in sensorial science, if only in representation. Symbolize something. Isn't that what the mind does best? Please become more than this missing, the desire for all I didn't do when I had you hanging from my arm. Punch the center of each note sung by gut strings against an ebony fingerboard. Hold the natural hair brush. Stroke color and texture. Compose fantastical works as spurious as hogweed that blooms each August out back. Become horticulture's dreaded cartwheel flower. Surely you are capable of imitation. Tighten and release. Find the light, lean into noon. Open fully, even short a pinky. Release 10,000 brown toxic seeds. Then let the papery skin, stretched tight from phalanx to phalanx, dry to a crisp before giving the bird to each pursuit I followed with the passion of one addicted to perfection. So switching over to angles, I know I did angels too on my website for a while, but it's actually angles, which they're really close, angles and angels. I think that's cool. Of separation, and this book is about the distances that we have between human to human, human and nature, human and spirituality. Angels. It's fine. I like angels.
It says angles on here, so I just...
No, that's fine. Angels, angles, whatever. Yeah, I didn't mean to correct you. In the Greek myths, it's Persephone, and in the Roman, it's Kore, the girl who disappears every winter to go down beneath the earth until she gets that pomegranate. Elusive mysteries. Again she is gone, Kore, the maiden who held a sheaf of wheat in her hand, a flower. Cold fogs the yard. The dog barks at hoarfrost. Once more she has been abducted. How cold she must be, beneath the earth, shivering, her room so small it could be a grave. How many seeds will she eat? And yet I remember her singing, empty-handed, playing at being pretty. I remember the feathers in her hair, how soft the green trellises of trees knitting themselves into willows above her head. As if it were yesterday, I recall the sound of her name in so many languages. All the mothers calling, searching their cellars, looking for stairs down into the earth, and she already complicit with the underworld. She, the go-between for a hare, a golden dog, a sick woman on a thin mattress, and twin owls whose yellow eyes hold their prey in dilated pupils. We get SAD here, seasonal affective disorder. I was on a vacation in Mexico, and I met a man and a woman. Her name was Judy, like mine, and she complained relentlessly about how horrible he was in New York with his SAD. I hope this was in JAMA, I hope he would never happen to pick this up, but I don't think he would. He might. Seasonal affective disorder. Outside, birds on oiled wings cross a sky barge-colored, stale. The old man's become different than himself. He casts his net for arguments, lies listless on a sofa covered in bright flowers she selected. Their stems prickle his side. Her voice, not again, in the background, going on about this or that. Snow plies the streets of New York. The boroughs no longer navigable as his thoughts begin to vie with memory, and again her hand gestures as if it were a signet he could follow or understand. The book, Judge and Jury, back broken, fans its pages on the coffee table. He's halfway through, a lost last territory still left to conquer, and winter just beginning its reign. So I said I'd read some scary poems. I don't think this is that scary, but it's about them there grim reaper. Somewhere the sickle still moves in the wake of its silver arc. Have cornflowers dried, wedded to thistles? I know we passed the man who cranked the old blade to one side. Was it a dream, Model T parked in a thicket of lilacs? As in an etching, the barrel prone, the man pulling his grass hook towards himself. Its whistling left to right as long bunched grasses shook reedy heads falling around his boots. Somewhere the scythe supersedes the sickle, its handle grim with premeditation. I do have a suicide poem. I do not plan to commit suicide, but just in case, I have a poem. And this needs a note. It's grouse, which is actually the feminine form of T.S. Eliot's, let me get my notes, Gerontian. And it was, so in T.S. Eliot's Gerontian, it's an old man. This represents the feminine version of his elderly persona. And it has an epigraph as well, grouse, 1,000 roads lead forever to Rome. Liken me to Gerontian, still I'm a woman, come to this room with its mauve curtain, these less than lavish quarters, my ledger empty. All around the rented house, winter-wrapped, dysphoric, acts I've done to deserve removal from those other well-appointed mansions, circle like winds from four quarters. I face into the wind to learn the scent of past misdeeds. Lost and old, witless with complaint, I think of the Judas tree. Its likeness poses, black on white, here in little Latvia. Leah turns into her driveway, still drives at 90. Today I saw her walking back from market, carrying a single bag. Will time force me in upon myself until I turn hard as the yolked egg each morning brings? It must be the rattletrap garage, tinted, dilapidated, falling in upon itself, that drew me to my wallet where I fetched the last check. Now, pots sit askew in other pots. Boxes plaster a tiled foyer. And when I'm taken from this house, has the landlord remonstrated? Is that remonstrated? remonstrated Mrs. S. again. When my husband has his way and moves east to the backwaters where taut, dry breezes conduct white birches, where the skunk wanders every alley in a town 1 street long, 3 blocks wide, they will say, ah, she never wanted to live here, so she stayed among the Norwegians, the Latvians. They will speak of me in my absence as if I were guilty of the crime of perfection, the vanity of guilt. Breathe in the headiness of seasons bearing change in sewn pockets, still the old outgrow their souls. Mrs. S., you have done your work, they will say, when my pills sit on the bedside table in little vials. To be a tenant of the body means one's chores are never done. I'll try to lighten it up a little with 2 more poems, maybe 3. Actually wanted to read one of my other short, poor poems on, I call these my organic violin poems because when I don't practice the violin, I try to write a poem about it. You should really be practicing. Leavings. In back of the flat, I planted a finger. Worms came to leaven the soil. A trill, da-da, da-da, da-da. Away from the room, in rain and early dusk, I planted other oddments, a cork bridge, a fist. Though bound, how those crossed fingers longed to arch and touch. I was so arrogant when I was young, and I think that arrogance is part of being young. I think if we're not feeling immortal, we're not going to do the things that we do when we're young. We're not going to have the children. We're not going to go places without a place to stay. So this goes back to when I was 16, disgust. And by the way, dégueulasse means like worse than disgust in French slang. The whole world finally quiet, and all you feel is a bit of rust in your veins. C'est dégueulasse, they said, when they wanted to convey the worst. No one could explain it. A word doesn't translate its disease. You would cross the Atlantic on a red eye for the scratchy, unlined wool coat an aunt bought you on a Paris street, for breaded veal cutlets, raw frog's legs, and mussels you force down your throat, swallowing more Beaujolais, smiling at the part, 16 and abroad with a violin, a.k.a. machine gun. So many men to stop you on the street, ask what's inside the hard shell case. So I'm just going to end with the one that I'm giving you for your anthology. You keep an anthology for the whole? Yeah, that's cool. I think that's really neat. And this one is seasonal. Let the cold come. Already it shines in trees holding seeds, festers on sloping rooftops not yet embossed with frostwork. Already the apples redden on their espalier. The children think a little more and harder. The old grow slowly older. A kind of moss creeps into our blood, green on red, red on green, complementary. Either way, it happens. Not to say time slows, it quickens. Not to say we aren't grateful to have had a summer as long and hot as hell. We are. Not to imply we'll miss the berries slipping into our palms, as if they'd been waiting on the bush for some kind of furless, all too human hunger. For the brush of skin against skin, that signal old as the first fall, when Adam led the cowering Eve away, behind them paradise bursting into flame. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Maybe you need to write an Angels of Separation poem, too. We'll take a break right now. If you haven't yet signed up on the open mic, it's list. It's right down here. And again, our question of the month is your favorite Halloween activity. Let's take about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll get going with the open mic. In that break, get something to eat. Thank the baristas. Give them a hug. Give somebody else a hug. Come buy a book. Give the readers a hug. Have a nice break. We'll be back in a few minutes.